Good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday morning. It's the 26th of January. So for most people, the scariest thing about January is how long it lasts, and I've got good news for you. It's only a few days left. 5 to be precise, am I right? Yeah, 31st, so yeah, 5. 5 days of this one left, and then there'll suddenly be like that salary that you had forgotten that you can get at the end of January. It'll like come in and wash away some of the pain, maybe not all of it, but some of it. That's the plan for this morning. Ah, yes. So Simphiwe is here and Bulelo's here, and I'm here to look after you. And what's going on with you? You can get hold of us in the comments on the YouTubes. It's probably the best way to do it. And there are other ways too, but we can't guarantee we'll see them, you know, like that WhatsApp line we haven't used for like 3 years. What if we find out that WhatsApp line something really important's happened and we weren't paying attention? What do we do?
Be too little too late.
Yeah.
Too little too late.
Like reaching out. Oh, if you guys don't reply to me, I'm gonna kill myself. Oh shit. We should have checked the WhatsApp line. We can't deal with that.
Yeah.
Yesterday I picked up a proper cup of coffee. Bulelo, I went and got from just down the road on our way into the office. I thought I'll go and get some coffee. And for a brief moment, it crossed my mind that maybe I should get one for Bulelo. And then I remembered, no. He's ungrateful and full of anger. And if I buy him a coffee and it's not the right one and I get the almond milk or something like that, then I'm in big shit. So I just left it.
I agree. You've made the right call. You've made a great call.
Wonder how many women have thought, you know, Bulelo would make such a nice boyfriend, but if I do it wrong, it's just going to be such hell, and I'm going to get into such trouble that it's not worth it. I thought of that yesterday. I thought we should.
That's a good way of looking at it. That you actually could have been in a relationship, but because you are who you are, you're blocking your own doors.
You know why I sleep so easily at night? I would never ask of another that which I wouldn't ask of myself. So my standards are where they are because I know I deliver that. So I can't be there for your emotions because you can't be consistent. You know what I'm saying?
All right. No, that will be. I will allow that comment to pass without comment from us. We'll just leave it where it is. Oh man. By the way, did I tell you we got a follow-up to that email about Australia the other day?
Ooh,
Let me just find it. Yeah. It's quite a thing. And isn't today Australia Day?
Australia.
I think it is. I think it's Australia Day today. Yeah, it is. It's Australia Day. So I got this from Michael, who listens. He says, thanks for reading out my email Monday. Most of it was anecdotal, but further details in a book I mentioned, and obviously in 1984 from George Orwell, which of course is fiction, but it's still related to the subject. I'm English, so I'm actually not from South Africa, but my wife is. So thanks again for the great show and the laughs that go with it. I'd love to live in Europe, apart from all the people and weather. South Africa would be great if the power ran and there was less crime. And Australia would be great if it didn't have the insanity of being mollycoddled all the time, and also less sheep. And by that, I mean the citizens. One place I won't be living in the metaverse. One place I won't be living is in the metaverse. I'd rather live in Syria or Iraq than in the metaverse, says Michael. Isn't that interesting? I think it's very interesting. You'd rather live in Syria or Iraq than in the metaverse, and I kind of agree with him. Would you like to live in the metaverse? Hell no.
No.
There are people who are buying up countries in the metaverse, by the way, and
it's a big deal.
And properties. Like I know someone. I was talking to them in Cape Town the other day, and they told me somebody who works with them has sold a whole bunch of stuff that they actually own on planet Earth in real life, and they've bought like the metaverse properties that they've always wanted. So they've got like a beautiful apartment in New York. They've got this incredible place in like the Greek islands. They've got a place in Sardinia. They've got all these places that don't actually exist in the real world, but in the metaverse they do. And so in the metaverse, this person is like a billionaire, and they reckon that one day those properties in the metaverse, well, he does anyway, will make him very, very wealthy in the metaverse. Now, I mean, that's like being it's like being an Instagram model, or it's just, it doesn't really count, or being a monopoly billionaire. It doesn't count. I'm sorry. Like I've tried to stretch the very limits of my willingness to be open-minded about this, but it's not possible, right? It's not possible that I mean, there's just no way that someone who owns metaverse property is one day going to be considered a gazillionaire, or is it? Because if you think about the gaming community, like, you can make way more than a living. You can become really wealthy if you're a gamer, and you have, certain, even though they're completely made up, certain abilities or weapons or characteristics or whatever that your game character may have developed and gained over time. Like, those translate into actual real world wealth for some people. They can actually just do that. So I've suddenly started to second guess myself and go, maybe I need to pay attention to this stuff. Maybe if you go into the metaverse and you actually buy the countries that are in there, you could become the rulers of these countries in the early days of the metaverse. And one day someone will have to wrest control of them from you. What do you think of that? I mean, is this too ridiculous to be believed? Because I immediately dismissed it. But the more I think about it, I'm like, I want to, miss the opportunity to buy, even if it's bullshit, for a couple of rand now. And then one day some, huge coterie of nerds comes along and they say, hey, listen, we would like to buy Iraq in the metaverse from you. And I go, okay, how much you want from it? Well, we'll offer you real world money, 5 million rand. Be like, okay, well, shit. Yeah, you know what? I bought it for 2 rand. You can have it. Here's Iraq. What do you think of that? Is it possible?
Would you derive any joy from that, though? Like true joy? So, famed philosopher, right? Super famous guy, Robert Nozick, did an experiment back in the day. As you were talking, I was thinking. So, Robert Nozick proposed to people, you can alter every single situation to your absolute liking, right?
Yeah.
But you're living in basically a flotation device.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And Nozick extrapolated this. I mean, he did this experiment over years, really famous experiment. And anyway, in this, nobody picked the fake world because it couldn't deliver. And it was the perfect world, by the way. You could make it exactly what it was that you wanted to the T. And nobody picked that world. So it makes me think, at some stage, as a human being, you got to have that, this sucks. My foot's sore. You know what I mean? Like,
well, there's that famous line in Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream where he says, basically, if I were to give you a love potion that would make you feel like you were in love, is that the same as actually being in love? Does that make sense? Because that's what the internet's doing for people. It's giving them this alter ego, this online personality, and maybe it's giving you wealth and power and importance and privilege and sophistication and all kinds of things that you don't have in the real world. But does that mean that your actual self is going to be improved by this?
No.
I would venture no, right? Like, if you could give someone a pill and they would fall in love with you, would that be the same as them actually in real life falling for you? No. It's a sort of it's duress, right? They don't actually know that you have poisoned them to love you. You've given them a pill. I find this whole thing fascinating, because in the real world, I would rather have real experiences. But then I'm not looking at this the way a future person might. Someone who is born 20 years from now may think that is the stupidest thing ever, right? It's just, it's weird. You really have to get your brain out of your own reality and try to figure what it might be like for someone who might live their entire lives online. And that could happen within our lifetimes, that kind of existence. Would you rather be a person who can go into the Matrix or the movie Avatar and live this absolutely incredible thing, but you're actually just in a simulation. Because there are people who say that living is just a simulation. You know, all the stuff around us is just a big game that some incredibly complex machine has invented, and that we all believe we're conscious, but actually we're not. You know, this is the hell of a way to wake up. By the way, I'm sorry if you've just woken up on Wednesday morning and thought, "Oh, those people be talking shit again." This is some stuff that hurts your head at this time of the morning, but it's worth thinking about. So, Sanele says that is so delusional. If that person was focusing all the time that they're spending in the real world, maybe they could afford something in the real world someday. Perhaps.
But there is a movie, I forgot the name, but it's all about the metaverse, and it's about this kid who, there was a creator who created this metaverse, and then he dies, and he's like, well, I'm going to leave my legacy to whoever finds these 5 thingies or whatever.
Yeah.
And like everybody goes into this metaverse, and they're all different people, and they spend so much money, right? To get the right equipment, the transport, the cars, whatnot. And then when they come back to reality, these people are just in a caravan, and it's just like poverty left, right, and center. And they spend every single dime that they have into this metaverse, which does have real life implications, because there's always good versus evil, and the bad guys try to get them and kill them in real life so that they don't enter the metaverse. For me, like, can we just focus on making me okay and real and good before I go out there? And also, people are fake online. Like, I'm no longer Simphiwe. I could be Jackie Chan, look different, speak different, act different. Too many lies, y'all. Too many lies.
Well, so this is where I get confused, because there's a part of all of us that lives in your dreams, and that's not the real you either. Now, how is this any different? And if you really want to hurt your head this morning, think about the person you were 10 years ago and how much you've changed and how different you are from the person you are right now. So this idea that just because you choose this random moment in time to think about yourself, that you only really exist now. The previous you may bear no resemblance whatsoever, and certainly this is something that Deepak Chopra said once that has always stuck with me. He said that all the atoms that were in your body at the moment you were created, or let's say at the moment you were born, that all those atoms, all the matter from which you were made at the time you were born, is now no longer a part of your body. In other words, all of those atoms have been switched out with others. New ones have come in, old ones have gone out. There may be a little piece of you, what was originally you when you were born, a part of you in terms of one of the atoms in the cells in your body, whenever that date was that you were born. That atom may have been breathed out, recycled, shat out, changed, whatever it might have been, and it might now be a part of the planet Venus, for all you know. So what are you actually attaching this idea of self to? And if the metaverse is going to be a real thing, and I no doubt that this is going to be the way a lot of people are going to choose to live, even if we think it's ridiculous, right? Even if most of us on this show think, what is this? Most of the people who listen to us, what is this? This is stupid. This is ridiculous. To some people, their real selves may be that, not this stuff you can touch.
But in the boring reality, no, the human experience isn't going to change for about another 20,000 years, because that's not how evolution works. And it's the boring thing about people who don't understand the incremental, what we call the march of progress in science, is the last time you'd have to go back to see a different Homo sapien about 25,000 years. So you can go into the metaverse, but the things you need now to truly hit your center, sorry, that ain't changing for another 10, 15,000 years. That's just how it works. Sorry. Soz. You can fake it all you want.
Okay. All right. I also think that we don't have the tools to necessarily figure out this world very well. It's like, for example, if you look at how social media is still developing, we're still figuring out what that means to us. And it'll take a very long time before our ape bodies, because we're apes, we're evolved apes, right? We got 5 senses. We're pretty primitive things, even though we think we're so involved and we're so complex and we're so interesting. To to all the miracles that could exist in the universe, we may be a very simple machine. We may be a very ridiculously primitive, backward, one-dimensional operation. The code that it takes to run us, if we were a computer, might be nothing compared to the code that it takes to run, I don't know, a star system. Obviously, the number of mechanics involved there is just, you'd need to be sitting watching that code for 20 to the power of 500 of the time that you would have to do it here for us. And I'm just interested in this stuff because if someone is buying bullshit in the metaverse, right, and they're buying this stuff, and and the real world people are deciding, because only real world people can be in the metaverse at this point. We don't know that other intelligence might be able to access this metaverse, or whatever it is, at some point. The fact is, if we're actually assigning value to it now, I do think that it's worth maybe just potentially considering what that might mean in the long run for us. It's just an interesting discussion. I don't know the answers, and it's very, very complicated to discuss this. People are saying Ready Player One is a little
That's
bit
the
of
movie.
That's the movie, yeah.
Yes.
Look into that. I remember watching that. Yeah. It's a very good movie, but like upsetting, because you think about what people's real life is like, but they're trying desperately to make their online life amazing. We are already a part of the metaverse. You cannot escape it. Yeah, I suppose that's true. If you look at the kind of people who have power in, like TikTok, those people are extremely powerful in the real world as well. They can reach many more people. They can influence things. They can create actions that have real world consequences, even if they're just a, porn star on OnlyFans or TikTok.
Yeah, but even if you have a credit card, you're in the metaverse, is what I think. Mark, he might be going a little out, because you are feeding information, buying patterns. You're constantly feeding information to some hub. Yes, yeah.
I saw that clip of Elon. Somebody mentions it here. That Elon says wearing a TV on your face is stupid, Mike. So he was asked in an interview, what do you think of the metaverse, and what do you think of this fact that people will live online? And he said, when we were kids, we were told not to sit too close to the TV because it would give you square eyes, and you wouldn't be able. Now he says you're going to walk around with this heads-up display basically in front of you the whole time.
Mm.
and he said that's probably not going to be very good for us either. Marco says, I'm getting Neurolink implanted into my brain in 2025. I'm serious. Watch this space.
All right, Marco.
That's awesome.
Sure.
Wow. It's like a tickle in my throat.
Jeez, you can be right there.
It's the metaverse. It's starting to take root in my throat.
Well, you must buy more blue pills. Yeah.
Okay.
That's how you get the cough away. Yeah.
Good heavens. If sleeping in a garage doesn't make you a car, slapping a TV to your face doesn't put you in an alternate reality. That's what Corona's Boring says. Yeah.
Interesting.
Bulelo looks like Tebow Touch today. Oh my God. Is that insulting or is that a compliment?
Oh no, man. Gareth, yo. Crazy, man. I'm living out much. You're living this life. You better respect.
Yeah. Elon is God says, I'm buying property in the metaverse. It's the only place I can afford. There we go.
Well, smart man.
It might be interesting to like just check this out. And you see, I wouldn't even know how to get into the metaverse at this point. I don't know how to, like, I don't own a VR headset. I don't game really. I don't know how to do any of this stuff. I don't even have an entrance.
Have you ever done virtual reality, Gareth?
No.
Oh.
No. I mean, I've tried it. I know what it is because I've put the headset on, and like this friend of mine has a VR setup at his house, and he was actually one of the first people I'd ever heard about VR from, and this is quite a long time ago. And it was this big clunky thing you put on your head, and you could do things like, for example, you could go into the White House and you could do like a walking tour of the White House, but you'd actually be in his house the whole time, And it looked like you were in there. You could look up at the ceilings and down at the floor and across at the walls, and like you were the only person in the White House, and it was pretty wild. And that's interesting, but I didn't feel like I was actually in there. And afterwards, you are a little bit dizzy because you do kind of lose a sense of direction. And the batteries on this thing kept running down, so you've got cables attached to it, and then it gets hot, and it's like it wasn't very convincing. But it's going to get better. We know people are going to figure out ways to make it better, and it's going to be super convincing at some point. There are these tactile suits that people wear now, where you can put on almost like a wetsuit or something, but it will put pressure on certain parts of your body. So if, for example, you're cosplaying, or your metaverse, your reality is that you're playing a sport. Let's say you're playing rugby online, and you're pretending to be like a world champion rugby player in this fake world, and you've got the whole VR setup on you. You'll actually feel when someone like bumps into you, you'll feel the pressure through this suit. And it's interesting, they're figuring out ways to get the other senses, because obviously in order to have humans experience things, we have to use those 5 senses. So you'll be able to see it. Seeing is actually the easiest one to do. Hearing's the easiest, then seeing, because we can create sounds, right? And we've even figured out how to make sounds feel like they're coming from here or coming from there. But that was pretty simple stuff to do. Now with vision, we can create these 3D experiences. Then we've obviously got to get past taste and smell, which are hugely complicated. Smell is actually way more complex than taste, even, because we have a library in our head of thousands and thousands and thousands of smells. Like that's why if you ever fell in love with someone, you can immediately remember what their cologne or perfume or even their skin smelled like, right? And somehow you can draw on that memory. And then there's obviously touch as the last one. And that's a difficult one because, we feel pressure, for example. We feel cold, hot. Touch is a very complex thing. People say it may be made up of a number of senses. It might not be just one thing.
So well, Socrates says we have 23 senses, actually, and Aristotle, if they're all linked. But anyway, that's really that's a conversation for another time, because they're all linked. We always look at them as separate. So if you link all of them, anyway, I take your point though. But is the metaverse meant to be strictly utilitarian? Because if the whole point is just enjoyment, right? Yeah. Is that the neuroscience is clear. Enjoyment is directly linked to toil and achievement. The amount of toil to get what you want, right? Mm-hmm. That there is a direct correlation to how much you're going to enjoy that thing. The more you toil for it, it's very, very clear. The neuroscience is super, super clear. It's not just people holding crystals somewhere in India. It is, so if I'm just plugging something in and boom, I'm Skulk Burger now, in the human experience, that's not as enjoyable, although I think it's enjoyable.
Right. But you're also doing other things that you haven't done. So I remember going to this like VR place in Mara's Arch, and there's like different games. And then there's like one where you're walking on this ladder thing, which is super high, and it almost feels like you're gonna fall off. And like when you fall, it's like you really gonna hurt yourself. And then there's other things like where it's more like action, and you get into it and you're like, oh my gosh, I've never done this. So there's different things that you do in that world that challenge you. But then you can also do the thing of like walking into the White House and just experiencing something like, oh, I haven't been to America. Let me see what New York looks like. And so you're doing things that you would never do in your typical everyday life.
Well, let me ask
also
you,
interacting with other
it's
people.
Not real. My point is, you haven't worked to buy a ticket to go to New York is what I'm saying. Like eventually you know that.
You know it's not real, but what if that becomes immaterial to the people of the future? What if they don't care if it's real or not? Like the people who think that it has to be real are going to be like the people who talk about tradition and, tribalism and the forefathers and the ancestors now. And we look at them and we go, yeah, that's all nice, but, we may not all believe in that. Think about how people used to be patriotic and they would like put on a uniform and go and fight for their king and country once. And now we look at that and we're like, we're not going to do that. Be stupid. So it's already happening in real time. the way that we change our attitudes towards certain things. I mean, it's interesting also to think about this, and then we'll leave it because this stuff is very heavy to start the day with. But if you met someone in the metaverse, and we've got some experience of this because people are meeting on social media and on dating apps all the time. If you met someone in the metaverse and they did you wrong in that world, like let's say you broke off an online relationship, or they hurt you in that world, or you hurt them in that world, do you think that might bleed over into real world consequences? Like, could you charge someone with a crime in the metaverse one day? Like, let's say someone breaks your shit. You've collected a whole lot of NFTs, for example, in the metaverse. I mean, I'm being ridiculous, but this is what could happen, right? And someone comes into your metaverse dwelling and they break all your NFTs. They destroy the metaverse version of you, your possessions. Would you be able to charge them with a crime?
So I think what would happen is that because people don't always use their real identity in the metaverse, is that in the metaverse itself, it's going to have its own laws and regulations that you'd have to follow. And if by any chance you figure out that, okay, player 58 is actually Gareth, then I think you could,
Translate
follow
it
it.
through.
Yes. But other than that, you'd have to be like, okay, in the metaverse, there's player 51 who broke this. What do I then do in the metaverse to make sure that he pays for breaking my NFTs?
And what might be interesting to me is that because the human brain is actually a really simple thing, it doesn't really care about how you feel and whatever. It just cares about surviving, actually.
Right.
So the brain doesn't know the difference in trauma between bloody hell, I dropped that tomato. Now I can't have the salad for the girl I like who's coming over the way she likes it, and my dog died. The trauma registers the same in your it triggers the same synapses. So it'll be interesting to me what world we lead to there, where, oh my God, my life's horrible in the metaverse. Am I now terrible at the post office? You know what I mean? Am I now terrible to other people because I'm registering fake trauma as though my world's falling apart?
Yeah, and this could very well happen.
Yeah,
I mean,
we're there already.
Right now, we think this is stupid and we think it's dumb, and we laugh about it and we mock people who are living in that world. It could very much be the reality for many people. I'm telling you now. So just think about it. It's worth, if you haven't ever considered this, then you're in the minority of people one day in the future. I'm telling you, it's going to happen. All right. Lots to talk about this morning. We've got some headlines to get to as well. 5 things you need to know. And we've also got Beyond Bitcoin coming up. Sean's not here today, but we're going to speak to Brett Hope, Brett Hope Robertson, who we've spoken to before. He's the head of investments at Revix. We'll speak to him in a couple of minutes' time. And I'll also tell you about the new episode of Beyond Madness, as if what we haven't discussed already this morning isn't Beyond Madness. I don't know. All right, so a couple of things in the headlines. Let's take a look at some of the big news stories of the day today. First of all, Cardi B was awarded almost £1 million in damage in a defamation case win. This is great. You know how I love Cardi B. Apparently what happened was the rapper and songwriter known for songs including I Like It, Money, and WAP was subjected to a malicious campaign of false accusations by someone called Latasha Kebe, also known as Tasha K. Kebe hosts a gossip site called Unwine with Tasha K, which has 1 million subscribers. She was ordered to pay a total of £927,000 to Cardi B, documents obtained by the PA news agency show. During the trial, lawyers for the singer, whose real name is Balkalis Marlanus Almanazar, said that Kebe had waged a campaign to damage and destroy her reputation among her fans and the consuming public. Let this be a warning to other people online, since we're talking about the metaverse and the online world. If you say something and you think you can get away with it online, whether you are anonymous or a real person who's got your real name and your real details up there, and this is obviously the case where, this woman runs a gossip website. She started making degrading and harassing statements in early 2018, and at one point falsely claimed that the star had worked as a prostitute. Now, Cardi B's lawyers said Comments and videos on the channel had caused the singer embarrassment, humiliation, mental anguish, and emotional distress. And further court proceedings will decide whether she has to pay additional damages to reimburse Cardi B's legal expenses. But what makes such an interesting breakthrough case is that there may be a precedent here being set, that you can't just say things about famous people or unfamous people and expect that you can get away with it. Because just as you can't walk up to someone in the street and just punch them in the face and think you can get away with it, you can't do that online either. So this may be the beginning of something very, very interesting that is developing on the internet. There'll finally be accountability for assholes on the internet. Let's see what happens there. I wouldn't hold my breath because it's going to take a while for this to filter down, but it's not impossible that this may be the case for all kinds of people, especially if someone has abused you online. You may feel that you are entitled to damages. Who knows? This case may be useful in the future as a precedent, as a breakthrough. All right. Boris Johnson's woes have deepened with a police probe into Partygate. Apparently, the threat to British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's position deepened on Tuesday as police said they were investigating lockdown-breaking parties at his Downing Street office and government departments. Allegations that a string of parties were held at Downing Street. While the rest of the country abided by the rules. You know what irritates me about politicians? I mean, there's so many things. So where do we begin? But these are the guys who said, you must, stay indoors. You don't go to work. You wear a mask. You must do this. You must do that. You can't do this. You can't do that. And then they do whatever they want. And they think that that's okay. Can you imagine being one of those people? And forget about parties for a minute. I'll explain why I think it's so disgusting. Imagine you're one of those people who could not say goodbye to a sick relative in hospital while they were dying because of COVID regulations. Do you remember when you couldn't get into the hospitals at all? So if you had a grandma or a parent or a friend and they were dying in hospital and you could not say goodbye to them, or you could not bury them. Remember when you couldn't go to funerals in certain parts of the world and in certain places, and even in this country, there were certain rules around funerals. These politicians made those rules. And I would be furious if I had not been able to visit someone who was about to die in their last few days because of these dumb rules that these politicians made up, because they were trying to keep us safe, which politicians, by the way, cannot keep you safe. Politicians, probably the last people you should trust to keep you safe. And safe is not a thing for humans, just by the way. Those guys then have parties in their offices, in their residences. I'm like, you know what? You guys need to pay. That's why people are angry with Boris. They don't actually care whether he had a party or not. But it's the fact that they weren't allowed to do these unbelievably important things in their lives. But he was allowed to do that. So anyway, they're going to nail him. And it's now going to start getting very swampy for Boris. Let's see what happens. Julius Malema has accused the ANC of wanting to dip into the SSA, that's the State Security Agency, 4 billion rand slush fund after Mondli Gungubele was appointed. Julius Malema has expressed strong concerns over the announcement last week by the president that Mondli Gungubele, the minister in the presidency, will assume political responsibility for the State Security Agency. Speaking in a media briefing held at the EFF's headquarters, Malema said the move was motivated more by Ramaphosa wanting to have access to the almost 4 billion unaudited SSA's yearly operation fund. Now, where do we begin? The State Security Agency is so cuck at their jobs that they couldn't even predict those July riots that happened last year. Remember? Now, if your State Security Agency is there for any reason at all, let it be there to be able to figure out somehow that there's some shit coming. That's their whole reason for existence. Domestic threats to our security. They couldn't even do that. They should have their entire budget slashed to like 4 million rand. Not 4 billion, 4 million rand. They should fire 99% of the people in that State Security Agency because they don't know what they're doing. Otherwise, they would have known, they would have been able to pick up on the danger that awaited many South Africans, that awaited the government, that awaited the businesses. They couldn't figure out that Parliament was going to be set on fire in December. Are you kidding me? Parliament. They couldn't figure out that there was going to be an attack on the Constitutional Court just a week later. Are you kidding me? These guys are not good at their jobs. Why do we have a 4 billion rand slush fund for them to play with? So whether you like Julius Malema or not, this is worth paying attention to. That's all we got to say on that front. You want some more?
Give us one
Sure,
more.
one more.
All right, you can either choose. There's the story about Fritz in the Western Cape, or there's the story about Amazon launching a clothing shop with fitting rooms that are interactive online. What do you want to hear?
I'm all about clothes. Amazon.
All right. Yeah, you can only take so much politics anyway, right? So
Mhm.
Amazon is going to launch a futuristic clothing shop later this year where algorithms from its interactive fitting rooms will suggest clothes that you might want to try on. According to the
Okay.
company's official website, Amazon Style, their physical store will feature men and women's clothing, shoes, as well as accessories where customers can decide on their favorite items in fitting rooms that will be designed to become a personalized space. While browsing in store, shoppers simply scan an item's QR code using the Amazon shopping app, which will then give the user various options from color to size that they might like to try on. Once the information has been entered, shoppers will enter a virtual queue while their personalized fitting room is prepared. The app will notify you which fitting room is ready while they'll unlock it with their smartphones, and all the items will be in there ready to try on. What do you think of that, Simphiwe?
Oh, I love that. There's a store in Santon that's sort of kind of doing that already. So when you walk into the fitting room and you have like one of the jackets that you picked out from the store, it will tell you the size, what sizes are available by like on the mirror. Like you can, so it's like really interactive. If you want to get another size, you can just press one of the buttons there, and then like somebody will bring you. So you don't need to leave the fitting room. Someone will bring you a different size or a different color, or you're like, oh, it goes with pants. Can you
Huh.
please bring the pants? So I'm excited about that in terms of like fashion and not having to like shop for 300 hours. Boom
But
shaka boom, in and out.
so I don't mind buying shoes, for example, like sneakers online, because I know my shoe size and they'll fit, right? But I mean, mostly maybe they won't sometimes. But clothes are slightly different. We all have such different shape of bodies, and I mean, you'll have to obviously put in your own details. And you're going to sit around measuring this and measuring that and measuring your waist and then your hips and your all this stuff, and then you'll go on there and they might not match it perfectly. You still have to try that on. And let's say that the dress or that the jeans or whatever it is that you're buying costs a fair amount of money. Are you going to trust this, or do you actually want to go to the shop and try it on yourself? Because that clothes is still one area that I'm a little bit about when it goes to shopping online. If I've bought that before and I know it fits me, sure, I'll order it again online. But I'm not going to try it for the first time there. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean that's how you're supposed to do it. Get a store that you've actually bought clothes from, and then like, oh, I can trust you online because that means
Mhm.
the sizes that you say works for me, or it's for me. But I'm starting to warm up to like online shopping. Like it's so convenient. I don't need to go and leave the office, for example. I could order like a pair of like 3 dresses, sneakers right now. I know in
Yeah,
2 weeks time I'm gonna get them, and I did not have to leave here. Great.
I
Like
don't
that's
mind
3
that.
hours of my life saved.
I don't mind that from the point of view of buying tech or buying groceries or buying household products or whatever it might be. But clothes, well, it's kind of important that it fits, I think.
Have you seen how jacked Jeff Bezos is right now?
Oh my
He's
God,
living
he
the
looks like
bachelor life big time.
what's
He's
going on
living
with Jeff Bezos? Looks like he is on a mad tear for pussy at the moment. That's what he looks like.
well, everybody just presumes again that his wife was a nice person because people always
Mackenzie.
defer to the woman was scorned. Maybe she was terrible, and he's like, thank God, let me get out here and actually live for once.
Well,
Maybe. I'm not saying she was. I'm just saying it's possible.
I think she might have been terrible because if you look at what she's doing with all her money, she's like putting it into
His money, not her money.
sorry, well, it is hers
Oh, it's
now.
officially hers. It's in her bank
Yes.
account now.
Yeah, it's her bank account now, Mbulelo. You must understand how property works. She's got it now. It's hers now.
Oh, sorry.
She's spending all of that money backing a whole lot of bullshit left-wing causes. So she may just be an awful person. Who knows? Certainly, I
Yeah.
wouldn't get along with her. Just judging by her politics, she sounds like an awful person. She sounds like one of those people that sit and lecture you about, like, trans lives matter, and and you don't understand. I mean, she's as white as a piece of paper, but she'll tell us how black people's lived experience is something that you just don't get. You know those people who want to lecture you about stuff they actually don't understand. She's going to tell us, you speak from a point of privilege. I'm like, hello, have you looked at your bank account? You're going to tell me about privilege, Mackenzie?
Not about the money. She says she'll
Oh,
tell you it's not about the money. It's about human experience.
I also have a feeling that someone called Mackenzie is just a pain in the ass.
Yeah, it is confusing. It's a surname for a first name.
When you have a surname for a first name, you're usually a pain in the ass. Anyway, let's see. Maybe she's terrific and Jeff is the problem. But he does look like he's trying to imitate like Vin Diesel crossed with The Rock, crossed with, some turbo nerd. But he's wearing these like shirts that unbutton to like almost his belly button.
The deep V. Come on.
And like, pitbull type sunglasses. And he's really trying. Yeah,
he's in Miami now.
He's such a bachelor. Gosh, yes. Oh, yes. Like he can come our way. He sounds fun. Yeah,
maybe he's busy using these virtual change rooms to like try on disgusting Hawaiian shirts and shit. Maybe that's his thing. That's why it's suddenly a thing for us. I don't know. All right. That's your headlines for this morning. Now you know all the important stuff you need to know. We're going to talk a little bit about Revix, and I don't feel that Sean is avoiding us this morning, but we might just want to check with Brett because, of course, Bitcoin has had, and all the cryptocurrencies have had a hell of a ride over the last few days. We'll check out with Brett Hope Robertson, who is the head of investments at Revix. What the hell's going on there? So, hey, Brett, not the best week for us to be talking to you. I hope Sean isn't dodging a bullet here because he always gets to talk to us about prices going up and everybody's investments turning golden. And you're going to tell us this morning some hard truths about just how this market moves up and down, right? How are you?
Good, thanks to yourself. Thanks so much for having me on. I just must say, I must actually agree with you with the online shopping thing.
Yeah,
I think it's only shoes for me, and other than that, everything else needs to be fitted.
Well, I reckon so. Huh? You go into a shop and you try it on. You know when you put it on at home, it's going to work for you. You buy it online and it arrives. It's like all those jokes that people put up on the internet about Wish. The Wish version of something.
Yeah, exactly that.
That it always looks
and
like.
You end up sending it back, and you're wasting another 2 weeks anyway.
Exactly. All right. So listen, a lot of people are very unhappy, and this happens. I mean, I'm not saying that it's unexpected. A lot of people are very unhappy about what goes on in this market, especially when things don't go up. So what is going on with the market this week, and how does the Fed in America, the Federal Reserve Bank, have a role to play in all of this? Because people are telling me that that's the main motivator.
Yeah. So look, it's been a tough couple of weeks. I mean, the market has been, going in one direction for a bit, and it kind of comes down to one major decision, and it's: do you kind of go with the Fed and believe that the Fed's, as they say, everything's going to be okay, or do you kind of err on the side of caution and say, look what's happening around the world? Maybe the economic outlook isn't that great. And so basically, just to recap, over the last few weeks, markets across the globe, traditional assets, crypto assets, have all gone into like a risk-off mode, right? And risk-off basically means that investors around the world decide, the crypto or the macro outlook is too risky to invest in these kind of risky assets. And therefore, they look for safe haven assets. So your safe haven assets are normally your golds, your defensive stocks with big dividends or cash. And your risk-on assets are things like your cryptos and your tech stocks.
Yeah.
We've seen this risk-off happen. Bitcoin's fallen, 46% so far. The NASDAQ, which is the tech-heavy exchange in the US, has fallen about 17% over the same period, while gold's actually been up about 2 to 3%. And as you say, most people are kind of asking why, what's happening, and how does the Fed kind of play a role in this, because they keep hearing about this Fed, right? So the Federal Reserve basically, let's be blunt, has printed a shit ton of money.
Yep, absolutely.
To basically keep the US economy up and running through COVID. And I mean, it's a substantial amount of money. It's roughly, I think, 80% of all money in US money printed in circulation today was printed in 2020 and 2021. 80%.
It's crazy. And, when you flood the market like that, it's not going to have no consequences on the price of things. It's going to affect things horribly. It's going to create enormous amounts of inflation, which currently the Biden government is trying to deal with in America. Yeah. But it's going to have supply chain problems associated with it too. There's obviously all the repercussions of what COVID has meant for the world. But all of this is self-inflicted harm by the US government on the United States.
Yeah. So they had to do something to try to keep their economy afloat during this time. And I think they let it run maybe a bit too long. And that's kind of what they're kind of trying to deal with now. But all this money, as you said, that flooded into the market, it to an extent funded your stock market and your crypto run that you've seen. And this is basically how it works. I mean, if you print money and there's low interest rates, money is really cheap and easy to borrow. So investors' risk appetite all of a sudden gets a bit heightened because money's cheap, and they take that cheap money and they put it into assets that they think has an asymmetrical upside, right? And it's things like crypto and your tech stocks.
Mm-hmm.
But as you said, when this happens, one thing happens when you print a lot of money is inflation. And the US sit there today with the highest inflation in 40 years and a savings rate that's probably sitting at about 0.5%.
Mm-hmm.
And you can understand how people are getting annoyed. I mean, they're going, I'm losing money every basically second. And so over the last year, they've been forced to look for yield, and they've looked for it and they've found it in crypto. But now the Fed's going, okay, well, inflation's out of control. We need to use our tools, monetary policy, to basically reduce this. So they reduce the amount of money they're printing and they start to increase interest rates, right? And the idea behind this is basically if you increase interest rates, it becomes more expensive to borrow this money. Therefore, you won't spend this borrowed money on goods and services. Savings accounts also look more attractive. So maybe people start saving instead of spending in the economy, and it'll start to cool off. But that does pull a handbrake on your tech and crypto stocks because it was partly funded by this cheap money for the last 2 years.
Right.
And so that's basically where we come to today, right? The Fed knows it's too high. They're going to start cutting rates, and they actually have a rate decision today.
Mm-hmm.
And the market's basically saying there's going to be no rate hike today. But obviously, if there is a surprise, we would see crypto markets slide further. So basically, this massive pullback that you're seeing is literally just all the investors going, we are pricing in 4 rate hikes. Bitcoin's off 46, ETH off 49. But this isn't anything new. We've seen this volatility in this asset many, many times. And even Amazon went through pretty much the same volatility back in the internet boom, right?
Well, I must tell you, I mean, stocks you mentioned earlier have not done very much better. For example, if I look at some of the stocks that I'm interested in here, Amazon in my portfolio is down 17% over the last little while. Google's down 12%. PayPal's down 45%.
Going to be your mature asset, right? Compared to crypto.
Yeah, correct. So I mean, those are numbers which are comparable. But the other thing that we've got to remember here is that the US government didn't just print a whole lot of money and inject it into the economy. They also gave individuals money. There were these rescue plans. There were these bills that were passed to help people who either lost their jobs or needed help through COVID. So they essentially gave people free money. But free, in inverted commas, is never free. And many of those people may have spent that money on crypto. They may have gone into the crypto market and actually taken some of this extra money that the government had given them and bought crypto. So obviously that created an artificial spike in crypto, which we're now dealing with trying to right size. Is that something that's worth considering as well?
Yeah, no, definitely. And basically, so it all kind of boils down to, all risk assets right now kind of sit squarely on the shoulders of the Fed, right?
Mm-hmm.
What they decide to do with rates. Outside of your obvious tail risks, like, for example, your Russia-Ukraine debacle, I'm sure you have an opinion on that.
Yep, absolutely.
That's another risk, right? Russia decides to invade Ukraine, or they decide to pull the oil with the gas lines into Europe. You're going to see risk off around the world as well. So there's a lot of these little factors at play. But the one thing we do say to everyone is, these markets go in cycles. And if it goes up straight line whole time, that's not a market. That's pretty much a scheme, right? It has to go in cycles. It has to reset. And long-term investing is the way that you deal with this volatility. It's the only way I've seen you can trade. If you try to trade this market, you're going to get chopped up. A long-term investment strategy is just the best way to handle it.
All right. So is this a good time to buy? Because usually when the price is down on what people expected it to be, they go, oh, well, this is a good time to buy. There are a lot of people, even in the comments, someone is saying here, Stinkmean is saying, I'm already buying more crypto. So people are doing that. But there are also people who are divesting now. They're saying, oh, my God, if it goes down any further, it's going to ruin me. What am I going to do? You know, what
So
would your...
I think that all depends on how much you have in this asset class right now, right? If you've got your life savings in it, of course you're looking to divest a bit. But if you've got, your 5 or 10% allocation or your certain amount of money and you've got spare money to invest, historically, technically dips over 35% have been good buying opportunities. That's just the way it has worked. I mean, I personally view it as long-term investing. Over 40% dips, I'd normally start clipping myself back in. Because, I ran a little analysis myself on Bitcoin because I came across a study on the S&P that showed, from 1996 to 2015, which, yes, is a bit dated, but it was over 19 years, and the S&P returned 8.2% per year over that time, right?
Right.
But they did a study that said, okay, well, if you miss the top 10 trading days, you're trying to trade the market, trying to get in and out, and you happen to miss 10 of those trading days over 19 years, your return dropped to 4.5%.
Right.
If you drop the top 20 trading days, your return dropped to 2.1. And if you dropped the top 40 trading days, if you missed 40 trading days in 19 years, you lost 2% a year versus 8.2% if you just did nothing.
Wow.
So I did this and I saw this and I was like, wow, let me look at for crypto. And obviously I look at Bitcoin because it's the longest standing data points we kind of have. And I said, okay, regardless of any day in Bitcoin's existence, let's say market top, bottom, bear market, bull market, Fed hiking rates, Russia invasion, whatever happens.
Yeah.
Let's say you bought it on the single worst day in Bitcoin's history. You bought it 2017 market top, bang. You're the worst trader in crypto history. Well done. And you held it for 5 years from that point of purchase. You received 27% a year on year for 5 years.
Wow.
As long as you held it for the 5-year period. You outperformed 99% of fund managers on that. And you're the worst crypto trader in history.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of power of this asset class. So I think if you've got a long-term time horizon, yes, over 40% is, I would start buying back in a little bit. Because maybe this time is different. Maybe we have Russia invade Ukraine. Maybe all these things happen. But from history's sake, worst case scenario, you're making 27% a year for 5 years.
Right. Okay, well, listen, it's up to people to make their own decisions as to whether you want to buy more, whether you want to sell some, whether you think it's a good time to get into some new cryptocurrencies. You guys have got so many options on the Revix platform. So I know you run promos all the time. You got a promo running this week?
So we've been running it from the 21st of January to about the 31st now. And basically, it's if you sign up with a promo code REVX500, verify your account, deposit and invest more than 5,000 Rand into one of our assets and hold it for a month because we're trying to incentivize long-term investing, you'll receive $500.
Okay, that's very good. So you get 10%. Very nice.
Yeah.
Just for playing the game, you get 10%. That sounds like a good deal to me, especially in a week where most people are a bit miserable about crypto. Nice one, Brett. Thank you very much for talking to us this morning. And tell Sean we take a dim view of him sidestepping this and leaving you in the shit crypto week. Come and talk to us.
I'll let him know.
All right, man. Thank you very much.
Guys.
And that's Brett Hope Robertson. He's from Revix.com. You can find out more by going along to Revix and signing up today. And while we're talking about all the things that Brett mentioned there, it's worth also looking at what Stink Mina, who's obviously commenting here on the crypto issues at the moment, saying it's a long-term investment. Don't put your life savings in or you will see flames. And then some people saying you will never make money in crypto, like at Michael. When the market is cooking and everyone is smiling and Sean shows up, we make money when everyone is running scared and the market feels like it is crashing. That's when we buy. What did Warren Buffett say? When others are fearful, be greedy. When others are greedy, be fearful. So that sounds sensible. All right, very good. And that is all you need to know this morning. You can find out more by heading on to Revix.com, REVIX. Sign up for free, verify your ID, add funds, and select the bundle of your choice. And you will find all of the opportunities that crypto may have in store for you. And also, it's a ride. So sometimes they're going to be dips, and sometimes they're going to be crests. You just got to settle in for the long run. All right, that's all we got time for in this hour of the show. We got more coming your way in the next hour. It's a Wednesday morning, cliffcentral.com. Simphiwe's here, Bulelo's here, and you are part of the team this morning. Here's the full name. All right, sit down. Make sure you're sitting down. Make sure you got a cup of tea.
Pablo Diego Jose Francisco de Maria de los Remedios Cipriano de la Santissima.
Well, none of these were classically beautiful women. This woman, not beautiful by today's standards, he painted many pictures of her. She was also his muse. Many of these women were. He clearly had a bit of a sadistic streak.
The story was he'd walk around with a pistol that he loaded with blanks, and then he would use it to fire people that he didn't like.
Do you suffer from collectivism?
I've got this love affair with French antiques.
Do you have an obsession with objects?
This is a King's African Rifles bayonet.
Are you a fanatic? A devotee? Are you someone exhibiting enthusiasm or strong passion?
I've got like 4 or 5 really big trunks in the garage that are full of my Christmas decoration collection.
Cliff Central dispenses a weekly dose of collectomania. Join me as I talk to compulsive collectors. Fascinating.
Then you get the limited editions that were like 100 made worldwide.
Possibly a little weird.
So I have a collection of collections.
Collectomania, Mondays on the Gareth Cliff Show. Brought to you by SA Gold Coin Exchange and the Scoin Shop.
Yo, I put it like wow, this that sound. These oaks don't work hard like me, I hope they know by now.
Which, if you haven't subscribed to the MKT show yet, Bolelo is very, very sad. He's crying on the inside, even if he doesn't show it on the outside. But go and subscribe. He's working his ass off on this show. And if you haven't seen it yet and you don't know what the fuss is about, then you really don't have an excuse. Go and check it out. It's a worthwhile endeavor. Yeah, if you don't like it, he's not going to be upset. He's not going to cry. Just go and have a look and try it out. You never know. It may be just the show for you.
And anyway, I would never cry in public. I cry at home like a good man should, and I curl up in the fetal position. So there's that. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
But quick question, Mbulelo. I remember once upon a time you're running a whole, if you guys get to 1,000 subscribers, you're giving away 1,000 Rand. Has that taken place? I just need to know.
Have you given away
Has the
your
winner
own
been
money?
announced?
No, so we haven't given away 1,000 Rand. We're trying to find a way to make it a nice giveaway. And so what we're thinking we're going to do it is the AFCON final. So if you don't know, we're doing live watch-alongs on TikTok. So we're actually going to make it a proper event. It's because I'm in the content game. You know what I mean? You always got to be thinking, when is the prime time? So AFCON final, that is the 6th of February. We will give away that $1,000 to somebody. So
Wait, say that again. The 6th of February. Okay.
6th of February. Or because people are terrible at remembering dates, the AFCON final. So big thing going on right now. We're doing live watch-alongs.
Simphiwe doesn't care about your show. She doesn't care about the AFCON final at all. She just wants your money. That's all she's interested in, right? Simphiwe?
She is a lady. She is a lady.
I mean, I did
consistent with
subscribe.
Bezos' lady.
I qualified to win. I just want to know the T's and C's. Who's going to be doing the draw? Exactly where would this draw be taking place? I just, just
she just wants your. What makes this extra exciting and sexy for Simphiwe is that she can get her hands on your money. It's not so much that it's just money, that it's yours. like you mentioned Mackenzie Bezos. It felt good for her to say, I'm taking half of your money, not just I'm getting a couple of $1 billion, you know? It was about
I see what you're saying.
about schneeing the ex-husband for whatever reason. And, you know,
I got
get
you.
You get those people who are evolved and mature, and they're like, oh no, if we ever break up, we must just part with a hug and a kiss. Then you get those mean people who are like, no, this will be an ugly divorce. And trust me, if you cheat on me or if we break up, I'm going to become one of those mean exes who's going to chase after every cent. I'm going to have the lawyers harassing you day and night. I'm going to make your life a misery if you leave me. You get those people. And some men are like that. It's not just the women. You know, some men maybe become more stalkerish if they haven't completely let go of an ex. You know, they kind of drive past her house and that sort of weird shit. But for women, sometimes it's the money. Sometimes they also do the weird stalkerish shit, but it's far less common with women to do the stalkerish stuff than it is with the men.
But I will say one of the things that I've seen become a trending thing is divorce parties. Like, I'm still a bit taken aback with that. Someone will
went
do
to
a
one
whole...
2 weeks ago.
Wait, what?
Yeah, it was banging. It was awesome. It was absolutely awesome. Yeah.
What happens? Like, I get the fact you divorced, but what are you celebrating that you are now a bachelor, a bachelorette? What's it about? What do they do? Do you guys are like, yo, shut out? You know, you did a great thing. You left that asshole. Like, what? Yo, I'm fascinated.
What do you do at a divorce party, Bulalo?
No, it was just like she was terrible in this case. Like we all knew it, but because we're all mature, we'd never said anything. It's just like, imagine if somebody got out of prison, you would celebrate, right? Like, hey, the boy's back. Yeah. So you're out now. Yeah. The best version of you can, if you can get over the emotional trauma. Maybe we see you in about 2-3 years once you've actually, if you decide to do what they're calling the work. We'll see you in 3 years. But let's break out. Come on, let's live. You're back, buddy. You're back. That monster's gone. Yeah. So it was awesome. It was awesome. I hadn't seen that guy like that in 10 years. It was amazing.
Wait, this was a guy that that hosted the party.
Oh yeah, at his house, banging house as well. Got to keep the apartment in in a pretty nice place here where the apartments cost so like generational money just for one apartment. It was in his apartment. We were moving and grooving. It was great. There were other girls there. It was great. It was like, okay, cool. You've moved on and you've clearly set this up for a while. It was amazing.
Okay. Well, that's great. Yeah, good for him. I wouldn't have a breakup party. I would just keep it on the DL. Frankly, I think it's kind of. I feel like it's a little bit tasteless. I mean, I understand if you've been in a horrible marriage and you've decided like you need to celebrate with your friends, but you don't advertise it. And I certainly wouldn't want my ex to find out that I was having a party to celebrate the end of our relationship.
Remember there was that lady who was doing all the videos, quite famous South African lady. I don't know was it Black Coffee's lady? I think.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what if your wife dragged out your divorce like that, Gareth, for all to see? Like Gareth is, and by the way, his hair's a wig. He takes it off every night. Like, what if she's...
I think
he's not this good looking. No.
Yeah.
I
this
find
is not
he
the
actually
real
wears
him.
platforms. He's not even that tall.
I must be honest with you.
I had to deal with this for 10 years.
That stuff is so tacky and disgusting. I don't like it when I see that. Even if it's someone I don't like.
That's bad.
I don't like seeing people destroy each other in public. It's just so ugly. And I don't think anything good comes of it. Maybe I'm finally growing up because I used to also get a little bit of a thrill, like when you saw someone you didn't like going through something and you're like, like Cardi B. But I'm not like that anymore. I genuinely wouldn't be pleased to see anybody's dirty laundry being aired in public. I think it's just so horrible and tasteless and disgusting. So no, if you can avoid it, avoid it. And if that makes me sound boring, sorry. There's lots of shit people in the world. You just have to go on social media to find them. People who are selling out each other's secrets and, mopping the floor with each other's reputations and trying to get money out of each other that they're not entitled to. It's just, I find the whole thing very ugly. It's also part of the reason that modern relationships are so vapid. and give people so little joy. You look around you and you see all these people swiping left or right in the real world. They're like, oh, no, I was with her for like 2 weeks, but I didn't like her. So I just kicked her to the curb. I've got someone else. I think that when you treat people like that, just expect to be treated that way yourself. A little bit of karma coming at you.
I would say that I'm not feeling this whole, we need to celebrate everything. Like the divorce party is one thing. And then there was like a reality TV show on TLC about the best funeral ever. And I'm just like, hold up.
Wow.
Wait, what's going on? Like, why are we celebrating this person's death? And it's so ridiculous. Like, let me tell you, for those who've never watched it, right? As the name suggests, best funeral ever. And you'll have the family of the deceased. They'll be like, you know, Temba was such an athletic person and he loved being on the track. And then this organizer will be like, okay, that's the funeral. And they'll have the whole casket and they'll have people and then they're running down the track and then he's placed on the thing. And you're like, why are we doing this? Why does everything need to be a party? No, guys, like, stop that. Stop.
Well,
no.
I heard a horrible story. This was late last year about this this woman who she took like a selfie of her dad and her dad's casket at the funeral, and she like put this thing on social media, and then people were saying this is so tasteless. Like, why would you want to share this with everybody else? Or else it could even have been a picture of like the casket was open, like her dead dad was in there, and she was basically like looking for likes. And people attacked her on social media, I think justifiably in this case. She was like, but I'm just trying to deal with my grief. Well, then why share it with the world? Like, there's some stuff I don't ever want to be involved with someone who would use their own family's demise, the death of someone in their family, as a reason for other people to like their social media. That is exactly the opposite of the kind of person who would add value to my life. And I don't care if that makes me sound boring, but those people are terrible, terrible people. Like a funeral, have some dignity, you know?
What about my man, the South African celebrity? He was famous for the nomatrequency, Void. Well, what's his name? I don't know, man. He does these things. I don't know what his name is. Anyway, don't you remember a couple of about a year ago, his father died, and he wore like 4 outfits in one day, and he had a cameraman while he was wearing Air Force Ones at his father's funeral, and he made it into content. Don't you remember it? And he was wearing one of these gender neutral outfits. You know these ones.
I know who you're talking about. He's that.
What's this guy's name, man?
Lasise.
That's it. Lasise. What about my man who just went?
That was Team Too Much as well. Like that was
right.
I think I'm with Gareth on this one. Like I'm a bit old school. Like certain things, guys. Even when people post, like if they find out that they aren't passed on, and then the first thing they do is want to put it on WhatsApp as a WhatsApp status, and now it's like, relax, chill. Not everybody knows yet, and one thing you don't want to do is find out that you know someone that you love has passed on via WhatsApp status. Like allow the family to tell everybody, give them a few hours, give them in fact the whole day to deal with it before you go around tweeting and putting it on socials. Like have some respect for certain things. Like when it's a wedding, great. When it's a funeral, relax. And that's my thing. Like, I can't.
Yeah.
Well, while we're on this, you might have heard about Patrick Shai, and we didn't get to this in the headlines yesterday, but I mean, he's a well-known South African actor, and if you look up a picture of him, I'll try and put one up now just to give you some idea of who we're talking about. But he's a veteran South African actor. He took his own life. His body was discovered by his wife in the garage of his Dobsonville home on Saturday morning. Do you know the story?
I just know that he passed.
So apparently, he said something like, he challenged Casper Nyovest to some kind of, charity, like let's have a boxing match or whatever and raise some money for charity or whatever. So Casper Nyovest, but he called him like hey, come on, you son of a bitch, let's fight. And Casper Nyovest was like, don't call my mother a bitch, which, by the way, is the stupidest interpretation of that is possible. And that anybody would take Casper Nyovest seriously that he's absolutely offended by this ridiculous idea that, he called his mother a bitch. I mean, this is like playground stuff. This is what you'd expect from teenagers. Do you know what I mean? So Patrick Shai used the term SOB, son of a bitch, which ironically Joe Biden used yesterday as well to describe a member of the press. And Casper Nyovest was like getting all upset and offended. Apparently, people started attacking Patrick Shai on social media, and this may have had something to do with the fact that he killed himself. Certainly, the two things may be related. It might have been the last straw that broke the camel's back. We don't know. He might have been going through all kinds of other stuff as well. But he took his own life. His wife found him hanging in the garage, which is awful. That's really, really awful. I mean, whatever happened there, if Casper Nyovest has anything to do with it, in terms of adding that last bit of trauma to this poor man's life, and this is Patrick Shai, by the way, that's the actor we're talking about. You may recognize him from a number of movies. I'll just give you a brief overview of his career. He was most recently in One Magic's The River. He was Mr. Pasha in that. He had an extensive feature film resume, included Cry the Beloved Country and Critical Assignment, among others. He became a household name after appearing in numerous television series, including Mission Top Secret, Zero Tolerance, Hillside, Soul City, and Yizo Yizo. And his wife found him in the garage. She apparently married him when she was 17 years old, and stayed with him right to the end, even though he also admitted to having abused her for years during the marriage. So a complex human being, this guy, like anybody, but an ugly end. Listen, just be nice to people on social media. There are two things that can happen. Either they might kill themselves like Patrick Shai did, and you don't want that on your CV, do you? Or they might sue you like Cardi B, and you also don't want that on your CV because you'll end up handing over tons and tons of money that you don't have. So let's just all be nice to each other on social media this year, can we? And just start changing the tone of places like Twitter, or get off, as many people have. It's not worth it. The amount of bad things that can ensue from where it goes wrong compared to the number of good things that can happen when you get a couple of minutes of fame, I can tell you now, it is not a good cost-benefit analysis. Just stay the hell away and don't be mean, even if you're anonymous. Rowan says, did anyone see the video showing the Eastern Cape councillor being dragged out of municipal office in the Amatola district? It was shocking. So I don't know anything about that, Rowan. That sounds hectic.
Dragged out. That does not sound classy at all.
No,
this is 2 days of the Xhosa brand taking a hit. I mean, this sounds a little targeted after all the success. We obviously gave you Nelson Mandela. I don't want to go over what Xhosa people have done for this country, the vote, freedom, or whatever. I don't want to say what Xhosa people have done. But
okay.
Sounds.
This is Ruth, would you want a loved one to find you? You want to end up doing it over a provincial line? No, you know what? This is always what happens. And I mean, I don't want to get into suicide on a Wednesday morning, if you don't mind. This Patrick Shai story is enough. And if you want to read more about it, go and find it on the internet. I don't want to go into like who should find you when you're dead or what the best way to kill yourself is. It's such a macabre topic, We've got better things to talk about this morning, frankly. And I know it's serious, but now is not the time and today's not the day. So I'm just going to say, for now, let's leave that thing alone, if you don't mind. Tembisa says we have to be responsible for our own mental health. We can't go around making people responsible for the last straw. Absolutely. But you don't want to be that person who says something really unkind or causes trouble for somebody else in their life that was avoidable, and then they end up killing themselves. I think that must be a terrible guilt to deal with. That's all I'm going to say. All right. I agree with a celebration of life instead of a funeral. We already discussed this with our children. Yeah, that's one way of doing it. But I mean, this show, Simphiwe, that you were talking about, this best funeral show, is that a local show or is that
nah. TLC, Americans. They're always the first ones to do these crazy things, and then the rest of the world hops onto those things. It was just ridiculous. I couldn't. Some of the funerals that I saw on that show was just like, Wait, what? There was an
Well,
athlete, there was a person who liked going to church, so they did a whole church service thing, and they had like almost the body almost dancing to the spirit of the Lord.
oh
And they're
my
like,
God.
Oh my God.
it's
Wow.
ridiculous. Like there was someone who was into the Formula One, so
Yes.
they put the body in like a car and
Oh no.
I was like,
They
what?
drove it around the track.
It's
What?
it's crazy when they say the best funeral, and then the family is like, oh, I know this is what they
What he'd
wanted.
always
You know?
wanted.
Yeah.
No, you don't know that, but hey,
Horrendous.
let's go
Listen,
with
I
that.
can't even watch those like super sweet 16. You know those things where these rich kids have these 16th birthday parties and they get like a car or they get a house or they get like millions of dollars from their parents. These terrible spoiled children who always, to a person, end up being complete shitheads later on in life. That super sweet 16 stuff. I can't watch that. It makes me so furious. I get so angry. Like I want to switch the TV off or I'll do damage to someone. I'll become like it obviously is something about it that that is just not good with me. I don't know why I react like that to a show like that because I don't watch a lot of reality TV. And as a result, I'm hardly ever exposed to it. But on the very rare occasions that I have been, I'm like, oh, this makes me so furious. I've got to figure out why it bothers me so much. These are some of the worst people in the universe, if you ask me.
I'll tell you the best show I've ever watched, and I think all parents need to encourage their kids to watch this reality TV. Teen Mom. That got
Oh,
me to ever be like, you know what? Even if I was thinking about it, even if I wanted to, even if I was like, yeah, let's do that show was the best show to be like, you don't want to be a mom in your teen years. In fact, you
oh
don't
my
want to be a
God.
mom at all. Like
Oh
that is
yeah.
the best show to get your kids to watch that. You see everything. You see the guys that were in love, and then as soon as the kid is here, the guy's like, I'm out, deuces. You see the family be like, yo, how are we gonna raise this kid? You see it all. Teen
my
Mom, best reality TV ever created. Best.
Oh man, it's that's the equivalent, the TV equivalent of those people who used to like have their kids spend the night in the jail cell. You know, back in the old days, just to teach them that they shouldn't be a
To
criminal.
teach them a lesson.
Yeah, if they were arrested for public indecency or drunkenness or whatever, that the parents would say, you rot there for one night, then we'll teach you.
I love that.
Teach you. No, it's very hardcore. It's not advised by psychologists. They say it does a huge amount of
Serious.
damage. But then psychologists aren't always right.
Mm,
No, they're not.
Tough love. That's all
Speaking
it needs now and again.
Speaking of psychologists and psychiatrists, Beyond Madness today is going to bring you an episode where the two come together. They're talking about eating disorders, when food is the enemy on Beyond Madness. You want to listen to this new podcast. If you haven't heard any of the episodes, this may be the best one to get in on. Well-known clinical psychologist Dr. D, who you know from this show, she's been a guest here a number of times. She joins Professor Christopher Paul Szabo to discuss eating disorders and the impact that these conditions have on sufferers. And you'd be surprised. There are people, great and small, who are all suffering from eating disorders. Don't think that it won't affect you. It won't affect someone that you know. This is a major and ongoing issue for many young people, particularly young girls, but it can be for young guys as well. And eating disorders are not that rare. And there are ways that people have developed to treat them over time. And obviously, this is where psychiatry, as in Professor Christopher Paul Szabo, and psychology, as in Dr. D, all come together. And they both discuss this in a very frank way. You've got to listen to it. It's really, really good. That is Beyond Madness, which is on today.
Oh,
Go on to
love
the
it.
Cliff Central app. Yeah, go to the Cliff Central app, go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and listen to this awesome series. Tracy says, my 600-pound life on TLC is the end of me. There's something about seriously obese people eating that sends me off the cliff. Yeah. Oh, my God. I saw someone sent me a video the other day of this extremely fat woman. And she's sitting there, and then the doctor, I don't know, it's apparently some famous doctor. And he's like, yeah, you got to stop eating. And she's like, but all I did was change the salad dressing. It can't be. No, seriously, this is it's hilarious. I got to try and find this for you, and I'll see if I can't play it off the the StreamYard that we're on this morning, so it'll come through on YouTube. You got to see it though to believe it. I mean, it's quite extraordinary. I found it. Hang on, this is going to be fun. Let me see if I can play this for you. But the mom. I think it's the mom is sitting there with her, this extremely fat woman, and the doctor. And apparently, it's one of these famous TV shows. Anyway, the doctor is like trying to help her get over how enormously fat she is. It might even be the show that Tracy's talking about there. And they can't figure out. They don't know how she got so fat. She's like, I don't know how. And she like wants to burst into tears the whole time. But when they zoom out and you see how big she is, you're like, I'm sorry, there ain't no way that's salad dressing. I'm sorry.
Do you ever see like a fat kid and think to yourself, oh my God, this is going to be the rest of your life? I do find myself every now walking around. I'm like, can you as a mother or a father not see what's going on here? And generally they are fat parents, but I'm like, oh my God. And perhaps, you know what? I need to check my privilege at the door because I've never been a fatty. But I think there is no way this child can enjoy anything of being a child and the rest of your life. Are you going to be this size now? Like there is no way there's any pleasure you can derive from anything looking like that.
You watch this. You watch this, and then I'll let you judge. Okay, you can be as mean as you want here, because these people on this clip have obviously put themselves out there, so they're not trying to hide the fact that this is their problem. But here we go. This is from that show. Right, so take a look.
There's a simple math. You're eating too much, you're not going to lose weight. Which part of this is very hard to understand, that she's eating at least 4 times what she should be eating. So why are we overeating and playing like we don't know what's going on?
But she didn't overeat. She's still eating.
You want to argue that with the scale? Don't argue with me.
But she
argue that with the scale.
She couldn't overeat. I gave her proportioned meals, and it's the same as I've always given her. The only thing that we know that might have been different is she quit eating the vinaigrette and ate honey mustard dressing.
She eat a gallon of honey mustard?
Now, I don't know how much she put on her salad.
The 2 cups.
But I can tell you that's the only difference. That's the only difference.
So she's scanning from thin air, right?
Well, I don't know how I don't know how she done it.
Dun, dun, dun. How do you like them apples?
No, no.
Mom, actually, I mean, listen, that girl, she must weigh 2, 3.
How did they get her in the room?
Maybe even 400 kilograms. I don't know. She's enormous. And the doctor's saying, because you could hardly, I don't understand his accent. He almost sounds like a cartoon character. He's like, she's eating 4 times what the average person eats. And the mom's like, no, there's no way. We haven't checked. I give her proportioned meals. I think she means like smaller portions.
Yeah, and then he says, I like when he says, well, hey, you want to argue that with the scale?
Yeah. Yeah, he's like, was she getting fat from thin air? Which is always a good question, right? You can't get fat from breathing thin air. I mean, if you eat less, you get thinner. It's that simple. And this girl's sitting there and she's like, did you see her facial expressions? She's like, oh, I can't believe it. How could I be getting fat when all I do is stuff my fucking gullet?
But that is crazy. So back to reality TV, right? There used to be a show. Don't judge. But there used to be a show called Super Fat versus Super Skinny, right?
Yeah.
So they'd get like an obese person and a super skinny person to come in and basically exchange their diets. But you had to list all what you ate in the day. So obviously the fat person would be like, at 8 o'clock, I'll have breakfast. Cool. And then at 9, they're like, I'll have a McDonald's meal. 10 o'clock, they'll have an apple. 12 o'clock, they'll have noodles. 1 o'clock, they'll have a snack. And they list, right? And then the skinny person will be like, okay, 8 o'clock, I'll have coffee. They don't eat anything until it's like 12 o'clock. And they'll have 1 apple. Then it's 6 o'clock. And then they have noodles. Now they exchange diets for like 3 days. And there was a chick that was that big. And she cried. She was just like, you don't eat. It's 6 o'clock in the morning and you haven't eaten for the past 12 hours. And the whole purpose of that was to show people that, sometimes people don't realize what they're consuming. So in her mind, she thinks that I'm only having 3 meals a day. But what you're actually doing is after the meal, you're also having chocolates and whatnot. So you have to deal with that. And then they also deal with the psychology of the skinny person who doesn't eat, to be like, what's your relationship with food? Why don't you eat? Having one apple a day is not healthy. People should watch that show because that's what that is giving me. Like, she's in denial with what she's consuming. Like,
Well, Robin says, Simphiwe, you are the Oprah of our time. There we go.
darling, thank you for saying it. I've been wanting to say it, but unlike Mbulelo, I wait for other people to compliment me. And from now on out, you can address me as Mam O, okay? Thank you.
Michael says, people that let their kids get fat are pieces of shit. And I'm talking about the parents that allow it. Yeah.
I do
There's
judge
something
parents.
to be
Yes.
said for that, right? How do people allow themselves to get that big? Yeah, there's got to be a point. This is what I always ask myself. Like, I sometimes see people on the news because I'm not looking for programs like this. Someone sent me that clip and it is hilarious to me. It's also sad in some ways. But, I watch the news sometimes. I see these big fat people on the news and I'm like, at what point do you look in the mirror? Because I'm pretty self-critical, but I'm not unhealthily self-critical, I think. I look in the mirror sometimes and I'm like, you are too fat. You need to do something about yourself. You need to stop eating and start exercising and, figure out some kind of plan to get yourself looking reasonable. Otherwise, no one's going to want to fuck you. That's the truth, right?
100%.
Yeah. And you don't want to walk around feeling embarrassed.
Although some people are into a little bit of...
No, I don't. Listen, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you have to be stick thin. I'm also not saying that you need to look like an athlete. Not very few of us get to do that in our lives. Bulelo's acting all humble, but he's fit. All right. Most of us are somewhere between
Mr. 8% body fat.
Maybe some of us feel we're a little bit skinny and we need to put on some weight. Some of us feel like we're a little bit fat and we need to lose some weight. There's a range that's still healthy. I'm talking about these morbidly obese people. And let me be very clear. I'm not talking about you if you got on the scale this morning and you're like 5 kilos, 10 kilos, even 15 kilos heavier than you think you should be. And remember, those words are important. You think you should be. There are obviously medical objectives that need to be brought into this too. If you're too fat, you put strain on your heart, you put strain on your entire system. It's not good for you. But I'm not here to lecture you on how to live your life. I will judge you, but I'm not here to lecture you. But the most of us, those people who are in that range, you may be a little bit overweight, maybe a little bit underweight. That's fine. That's okay. I'm talking about these morbidly obese people. Isn't there a point where you go, oh my God, I couldn't stand up today. I'm so fat. It's maybe time to cut down. That's where I get confused. Like, how do you just keep going? Just keep shoveling in that food.
But you have enablers, Gareth. So
like
in as much as, yes, I definitely think she's an enabler. She's allowing her daughter to live in denial. The daughter could have been on some, I want to change. And the mom's like, but you're fine. You're beautiful. No, and then keeps shoving food down her throats. And you're like, stop it. You need to go. You are actually the problem in her life. And so, that's also part of the issue. There are enablers out there.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave that as well because time for blind history. And you're going to find out about a man who, what a fascinating human being. Like artistic genius.
Thank you.
Personal. No, not you. Artistic genius. And someone whose personal life was just an absolute disaster. So it just shows you think you may have, you may have some talent from God, and maybe you do. Doesn't mean that you get everything right. It is time for the latest episode of Blind History, the amazing story of the life of Pablo Picasso, one of the arguably greatest artists that has ever lived, certainly one of the most prolific, and someone who people have been asking for. He was one of the names that came up when we asked you who you wanted to hear about in Blind History. So here it is, a brand new episode of Blind History for you this morning. It's all brought to you by Taylor Blinds and Shutters. You know them. They are the best people to talk to if you want to do any kind of window dressing in your house that you need to do shutters on your doors. You need to do, something to just make your house look a whole lot better. And Who knows? You've been spending the last 2 years around your house a lot more than you usually would. Maybe it's time you paid attention to those blinds. And you can do that by getting hold of Taylor Blinds and Shutters. All the details are on cliffcentral.com. But they don't just do blinds, they also do history. And that's where Anthony Meadera, the CEO of Taylor Blinds and Shutters, and I get into our passion, and hopefully it's yours as well, telling you about these amazing men and women from history and their incredible stories. It's time for Pablo Picasso. If you walk through the great art galleries of cities like New York or London, or if you're lucky enough to have dinner with a billionaire in their apartment, you might catch a glimpse of the curious, colorful, and charismatic Pablo Picasso. For most of the 20th century, owning a Picasso was the very expression of wealth and power. Few people, however, know the backstory. Picasso's turbulent, sadistic relationships with the women he called his muses, and the dramatic ups and downs of his long life. Today's episode of Blind History is about Pablo Picasso, who lived from 1881 to 1973. I didn't even realize he'd lived that long. Pablo Ruiz Picasso, when I'm giving you the shortened version, Ant will give you the longer one in just a minute. That'll take up 3/4 of the podcast. Is probably the world's most famous artist. I mean, when you think of modern art, certainly, there is no one who comes close. There are some great figures in art history. I studied it at university. I loved it. I never really understood this guy, and that always, to me, either means that I haven't paid enough attention, but in this case, I really tried to, or he's so clever that I'll never understand him. And that's certainly the impression I got out of it.
Yeah, and I think that he always said, I want people not to see, but to think when they see my paintings.
Well, it's phenomenal that in all the episodes of Blind History, we usually focus on generals and leaders and politicians and people who've done military things, or they've done political things, or they've done things in culture or in society or whatever it might be, science even. But the artists are hugely important because the artists are the ones that hold the mirror up and give the rest of us a moment to reflect on where humanity is. This guy had 9 decades. He lived a long time.
He lived a long time. He was very productive, although, you know, if you said that to him, he doesn't like that term, but he produced a lot.
Well, I mean, he's regarded, I think when he died, they found something like 16,000 paintings in his studio. And obviously the majority of those were his, but he also collected other people's work. And that kind of prolific talent that can just create that much stuff is a once in a lifetime.
And I also think the big thing with him is, you know, compared to his contemporaries, a lot of them found their talent or they became famous posthumously or later in their life. Whereas he actually, early on in his life, you know, with some of his paintings that he did when he was 13 and 15 years old, he was already showing it. And he sold his first painting at the age of 21 or 23.
Amazing.
It's just incredible that, I mean, and he was famous. He was properly famous, driving his own car, living in a chateau in his 30s. He made a lot of money. He was, you know, his death without a will, when he passed away at 91, I think it was just frightening. I think his worth it there was $250 million, and that excludes so many different parts.
They reckon this is maybe a good place to start, is that when Pablo Picasso died in that chateau in the French mountains, which he bought because that was apparently where one of his favorite artists had painted before. When he died, they estimate that his estate must have been worth, with today's, you know, kind of adjusted for inflation rates and all the rest, over $1 billion.
Oh, 100% a billion.
Phenomenal. For an artist, that was probably the first time an artist had ever been worth something while they lived and been worth that much while they lived. So even if you don't like his art, and many people are, you know, it's controversial, some of the Cubist stuff that he did, there are huge differences of opinion between art critics and art students and even other artists. But you can't argue with the money.
Definitely not. Prolific.
Apart from being this incredible artist, which we've already referred to, he was also an absolutely fascinating human being. His life was by no means straightforward. His relationships were crazy. I think one of the women he loved in his life made it out alive. And the things even his granddaughter said about him posthumously will make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. So let's get into Pablo Picasso. Where do we even start with this guy?
Well, maybe with his name.
Here's the full name. All right, sit down. Make sure you're sitting down. Make sure you got a cup of tea.
So
here's Pablo Picasso's full name.
So his full name was actually, and you do realize that I'm reading this, was Pablo Diego Jose Francisco de Paulo Juan Nepomuceno Maria de los Remedios Cipriano de la Santísima Trinidad Marta Patricimo Clito Ruiz Ye Picasso. And they came from relatives and saints.
Yeah, and please forgive us any pronunciation mistakes there. I mean, whether it was Ant or me, one of us was going to screw that up.
But the only thing longer than his name was the amount of women that he had.
Yeah. And of course, the paintings he managed.
That's true.
And the sculptures. Remember, he was also a sculptor. He was also a stage designer. There were many things this guy achieved in his life. So he was born to a father who was very much an art professor, an art lecturer, a museum curator. He was born into a family of artists. The surname Picasso actually comes from his mother. And the name Pablo was his first name, but it was also Pablo Picasso that sounds so good that a bunch of friends in his 20s decided he needed to call himself that.
He's always been a diminutive person. I think his height, fully grown, was 5'4".
He was a bit small.
And when he was born, they thought he was stillborn. Oh. And then one of his uncles blew smoke in his face, and then he took a massive breath. So
his uncle was the doctor.
His uncle was the doctor in the painting.
No, his uncle
was the actual doctor.
That delivered him.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
I didn't know that. Oh. And we talk a little bit about his early life. He was born on the coast, and the sea played a big part, sort of being close to Africa and art in Africa later on in his life. But he was born on the coast in Spain, in Malaga. And first of all, the fact that he lived through 2 world wars and a civil war in his own country can't be easy for people that lived in that era. There was an earthquake, I think when he was 3 or 4, a massive earthquake. He saw death and devastation. So already death was in his head. His sister died of diphtheria. That really, really hurt him, seriously hurt him. So that was just early on in his life, experienced these type of things. And played a role in his art consistently right throughout his life. He had this, not battle, but with death. It was around death.
He's supposed to have made a vow to God that if his sister, Concepcion was her name, but they called her Conchita, that if she would survive diphtheria, he would give up painting. And part of his motivation for being such a prolific artist was he was almost giving the middle finger to God for taking his sister away. I mean, it was a great deal for humanity, because if Concepcion had lived and he'd never painted again, we'd be very much poorer.
100% right.
So we've got to thank her for the sacrifice there.
But then he became a staunch atheist.
Oh, yes.
Strong Catholic family, and then he became an atheist.
He did study art, and he studied under his father, and he learned to draw. And in the beginning, he didn't always have money. So he learned to work with less materials and to do really incredible things. He clearly had a phenomenal talent, and even his dad saw this. I mean, his first painting, which you can see, he did at age 9. And it's just incredible. Again, through the course of this podcast, you may want to look up some of the stuff that we're talking about. But far before the blue period, as they call it, he had already started painting some absolutely incredible stuff.
And I think it's quite important in the context of this podcast to actually look at it, because it just blows you away. It's actually quite hard to understand, but maybe some inclination of his incredible talent. And having said that as well, you couldn't go and go to CNA or something and buy arts by numbers or how to paint. There were no art books in the late 1800s.
There were no art materials.
100% right, yes.
You had to learn to make the paints, which he was very good at too. And if you didn't travel and see other art, and his major influences, people like El Greco and, the other contemporary artists, which we'll get to in a minute, if he hadn't seen these in real life, there was no way for him to just Google it and use it as inspiration. You had to see it. You had to travel there. You had to be in the gallery or the museum.
And early on, which I think this is just his learning years, he rejected the traditional way of painting and realism, as they call it. So in other words, you paint something that looks like a mountain or it looks like a flower. So he was, as he said, you need to think about my painting.
Well, he certainly proved he could do the realism. I mean, he did a painting in 1896 called The First Communion, which is extraordinarily beautifully done. If you like classic art, you won't believe it's a Picasso. So he knew he could do that. It was almost too easy for him.
Yeah.
And after that, he started to be influenced by, the Rossettis and the Toulouse-Lautrec and Edvard Munchs and those kinds of people. And then obviously he started to change the way that he created this work. And the first period was known as the Blue Period. And we're going to concentrate quite a lot on his art, and you'll have to look these up. But famously, there are some of those works that are all, The Old Guitarist, for example, is a good one to go and look up. Very much in just blues, blacks, and whites.
Yeah.
Kind of monochromatic. It was to make people think about the desolation and solitude and sadness.
Well, it was a spotlight on his soul, because then he was going through proper serious depression. He felt that he wasn't there for his very close friend who committed suicide.
That's right.
And that's actually ignited the Blue Period.
Is that Casagemas?
That's Casagemas. So he was very close to Casagemas. He was in Paris for a while with Casagemas. They came back because Casagemas' girlfriend broke up with him. So he was in a really bad way. And then Picasso went back to his family, and Casagemas went back and tried to kill his girlfriend.
Yeah, he tried to shoot her, right?
Tried to shoot her, yes.
Yeah.
And then he shot himself. So you look at some of those paintings from that time, we talk about the Blue Period, even one of them was Casagemas in a coffin.
You could see the bullet hole in his head.
100%. And you can look at that picture as well.
And by the way, when you look at that painting, which you should go and look at, you should also see the candle and the different colors that he put coming out from around the candle. It's extraordinary how, before this kind of art, no one had done this. It had to resemble precisely what you would see with the human eye.
Yeah.
And it's almost like his eyes work differently than the rest of ours. The women that he famously, and we'll get to those too, dated and married and had children with, none of these were classically beautiful women. And they're all very different. He must have seen something in them that the rest of us just couldn't see.
True. But if you look at his paintings, and you have to look at the eyes of the people he's painting at that time, and it might be outwardly a picture that might be happy, especially in the Blue Period, but then you look at the baby's crying or the mother's looking away. So all of those things, there's massive meaning in the paintings. It's not just a painting of a baby and the mom, and there's
something going on.
There's something going on properly, yeah.
So the next period was called the Rose Period. His life got a little bit better from about 1904 to 1906.
Yeah, because then he started stealing everything that moved, and I think it just got happier and happier.
If you want to see a painting of kind of what the Rose Period looked like, there's a very famous portrait of Gertrude Stein, which doesn't look like a human. It almost looks like a mask. And this is where his art starts to change quite a lot as well. So he's established himself. By this stage, he was quite famous. And he certainly had a reputation, not only with the ladies, but among artists. His talent was, it was undeniable.
Yeah.
He'd been to Madrid and studied at the Royal Academy. He was thinking of going to France. He'd spent some time in the mountains, kind of exploring nature and figuring out how he wanted to represent nature and looking at things differently.
And that was a big thing for him.
Huge.
What he would do is he'd just walk the streets, and in this case he'd walk in the countryside, and just that's where he got his material from and his inspiration from, and that stuck with him. That time in the country was actually a very, very important period in his life, shaping how he carried on in the future.
Let's just talk about some of the women in his life at the early stage.
And we're talking early 20s now, so he's had a big life already.
Right. Okay, so he first of all was married twice in his life, and he had 4 children by 3 different women. Dora Maar comes into it. We'll talk about her. There was a woman called Olga Koklova, great name.
Yeah.
There was Françoise Guillot, who was the only woman who managed to say no to him and escaped with her life. We mentioned her earlier. And obviously his last constant companion was Dora Maar. And we'll start with the first woman in his life. There was this really interesting story about this woman who he seemed to have treated very, very badly. He locked her in their apartment, and he never gave her a key. And the only time he decided...
Was that Fernando?
That was right in the beginning, Fernande. Yeah.
Fernande.
So this woman, again, not beautiful by today's standards. He painted many pictures of her. She was also his muse. Many of these women were. But he clearly had a bit of a sadistic streak, and he was terribly jealous of these women's affections. Yeah. So he locked her in the apartment, only gave her a key after she almost died in a fire in the apartment.
And then I must understand the apartment's freezing cold, because he's still building his wealth, so to speak. He was quite poor. Freezing cold. and cigarette stubs, cobwebs. So, there must have been something extremely charismatic about him
she was just terrified.
Or terrified, 100%.
Yeah. So there was her. So Fernanda, and then she eventually, I think she killed herself. I'm not entirely sure what happened to her. I didn't go into too much of the detail there.
So she tried to keep him, and she brought he's a young guy still, and she adopted a 13-year-old girl from orphanage. Then she found nude paintings of this 13-year-old that he had done. So then they had to take her back to the orphanage, but she still stayed with him after that. So there's definitely, he had some issues, let's say.
Well, he did say that women are machines for suffering, which is not a very nice thing for any. I mean, these days you'd be locked up for saying something like that, and rightly so.
100%.
But he also said there were two kinds of women: goddesses and doormats, and nothing in between.
Yeah.
It's a hell of a thing to say. I think that maybe this is where I'll mention that quote from his granddaughter, Marina, who said he submitted these women to his animal sexuality, tamed them, bewitched them, ingested them, and crushed them into his canvas. After he had spent many nights extracting their essence, once they were bled dry, he would dispose of them. I mean, that's how his granddaughter spoke about him. You can imagine how these women felt about him in his worst moments.
But that's just it's descriptive. It's just spot on. I mean, that's quite scary. It's exactly right. If you look at the way it went, with all the women in his life, they were a ghost of the people that they started with, that set out with. So that's actually very, very sad. But one lady that made a massive difference in his life, and I don't believe, he was not in any relationship with her, was Gertrude Stein.
Yeah, she was his patron for a while.
Yes,
right?
And there's often talk that if it wasn't for her, he wouldn't have been as famous as he was. She bought massive amounts of Picassos.
Yeah.
She was ridiculously rich.
Yeah.
And that was quite early in his life that she started buying his paintings. And suddenly the paintings he couldn't sell, she bought up. And it just put him in a different league. I think she really, really made a big difference. And they were good friends for many, many years.
Just as a side note, for those people who don't want to go and do a whole research article on Gertrude Stein, just poet, playwright, art collector. She was American, and she wrote some really famous works and hosted a Paris salon, which was very famous among the artists and the writers of the time. So she was kind of one of those central tent pegs of the art world around which everyone else spun.
And every week she had functions at the salon, and he didn't enjoy massive amounts of people, but he made sure every week he went. So it was a lot of ambition and drive,
right,
in old Picasso as well.
I mentioned this François Guillot, she wrote a book actually after she and Picasso. She was the one who left him, and she did have children with him. They survived to this day. I think they're both alive. But when she wrote this tell-all book about him and his ups and downs and his sadism and his craziness and the way he would work and all the rest of it, he was first of all very annoyed and angry, and he sued her. But ultimately it ended up working for him because it painted this picture, if you'll pardon the use of those words, of a full human being. Instead of just being this genius painter who created all this amazing art, it also showed you the different qualities and characteristics and colors of his own life and soul.
We often
made him approachable, made him real.
Yeah. So the typical romantic artist, eccentric, drank, women, and art,
prostitutes, gambling,
all of those things.
Everything.
So let's get to his two marriages.
Okay.
So
first marriage
during the Great War.
Yeah.
He got together with Cocteau, who was a famous playwright at the time.
Yeah.
That's how you pronounce it, sorry. And then also Sané, that poet. So the three of them put together this show, this Russian play. And one of the ballerinas was Olga.
Right.
And he fell in love with Olga, same, both ways. And they got married within a year.
Right.
And they had a child together.
Paolo.
And that was the only legitimate child. Paolo passed away actually at a reasonably young age.
Yeah. He wasn't around for long.
Yeah.
He died in 1975, and his mother was Olga.
And they were married till 1953, but that was when she died. Because he didn't want to get divorced, because then he'd have to share half his estate. That's effectively. But she couldn't live with him anymore, so she took Paolo and she left.
Okay.
And he carried on with a whole lot of different relationships. The one lady died. That was very, very sad. He loved her a lot.
That was Maria.
Maria Eva, yeah. And then he had his second marriage with Jacqueline, which Jacqueline was the last lady to be in his life right until his death.
Jacqueline Rock.
And she killed herself 13 years after his death. She was an alcoholic, and she was devastated when he died. And that was his last marriage.
She also, Jacqueline Rock, she prevented 2 of his kids from coming to his funeral.
Correct.
So she was quite a force of nature, and she had quite a lot of control over the estate.
Everybody was saying she was out for the money and
bit of a dragon.
100%. But ultimately, I think there's a good story here in that the children, they were 4 at the time of his death, but and within 2 years, Paula died. But the other 3 were seriously involved in looking after his legacy, and they became extremely rich.
Right.
He didn't have a will, so there was a lot of legal wranglings backwards and forwards. But ultimately, in the end, they did get inheritance. And like you mentioned, the grandchild is also involved in art. He's an artist herself. One of the daughters went into jewelry. So I think they became, in their own rights, quite successful.
And there's still lots of money, and there's still legal wranglings going on. And many brands are desperate to get the Picasso name, signature, some of his work into their own products, and they have to pay a premium for it. So even now, his estate continues to generate enormous amounts of money. By the way, Picasso's most expensive painting ever sold is also the most expensive painting ever sold in the art world. And in 2015, the Women of Algiers version Or sold at an auction in New York for $179,365,000.
And it's somebody that painted our last century. It wasn't painted like at the time of William,
Phenomenal.
It's just incredible.
Absolutely phenomenal.
That is incredible. There was also some interesting things during his life, such as, his apartments that he rented in Paris, often they were full of paint in that. And one of the landlord at the time said, "You need to come back and repaint this whole place." And he would say, "What a stupid idiot. He could have just framed that and made millions." So he knew what his talent was. He wasn't shy to talk about it.
It's interesting, during the Nazi occupation, his art was not liked by the Nazis.
No, 100% not.
Remember when they took over in France, he was basically told not to paint, and he wasn't allowed to exhibit because people like Hitler and Goering had said, "Your art is degenerate." They didn't like modern art at all. But there were lots of Nazis who realized that he was a brilliant artist and that they could make lots of money, and they would do him favors, like they would give him exceptions that during the occupation no one else had, hoping that he would reward them with a painting or something. He never did. He used to give them a postcard, which maybe he'd sign. And that was it.
Yeah, so he played that really cool.
Yeah.
Because now in the First World War, a lot of his contemporaries, his good friends, poets, artists, they had to go to war.
Yeah.
And he didn't actually have to go to war. So he was young and fit in the First World War. And then a lot of people would scream at him, "Coward, coward," because there's this young man walking around Paris where all the other men have gone to war. But in the Second World War, initially when it started and when the Nazis came and occupied Paris, he went down to the coast. But then he came back. He went into Paris, and his reputation was massively enhanced, standing up against the Nazis during that period. But, truth be told, he was so famous and he had quite a lot of, like you said, inside help that I think he was okay.
During the war, he did a lot of quite critical stuff of both his own government and of the Nazi occupation. And then afterwards, Franco.
One of his famous paintings.
La Guernica.
Yes, probably the most famous painting.
Certainly one of them.
Yes.
And there's a bull and there's a horse, but it's also about his attitude towards the poor. And he very much mingled with society's low life in order to represent them as well as he possibly could in his art. Circus performers and prostitutes and homeless people and that kind of thing. So he was by no means snooty about his art.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. He did this huge sculpture in Chicago, and they had a very powerful mayor at the time. It was a big politician that bought the sculpture, and nobody knew what it was. Was it a seal with a man body? Was it a buffalo? And you couldn't understand, and nobody could really say what it meant. All it was that, let's just meet at the statue. It became famous. But there was one art critic that understood it, because they said if you look at the eyes and you look at the demeanor, it's every time somebody's downtrodden, every time they take more away from the poor. And it talks very much about getting what Picasso was really like.
Well, he also used his art as an autobiography, and he famously said that he invented a new style every time he fell in love with a new woman. And he had a habit of dating his works. And he explained that he wants to leave to posterity a documentation that will be as complete as possible. That's why I put a date on everything I do. And that's also why his catalog is so well collected and collated, because we can actually date each period. We can figure out of the thousands of pictures he did, and paintings and sculptures and all the rest, all of them had a date on them. Pretty amazing. He was keeping track of his life as it went by.
Another thing was, on growing up, he had quite a snappy temper. He really didn't believe in his teachers. And later on in life, he would walk around, what the story was, he'd walk around with a pistol that he loaded with blanks, and then he would use it to fire people that he didn't like. So anybody that was boring or anybody that insulted, Cézanne, who was a French artist and impressionist.
Oh, Cézanne.
Yeah.
Cézanne, because he was a massive fan of Paul Cézanne's work. And Cézanne is also the artist I was referring to earlier. When he bought that chateau in the mountains, he actually called up his friend and he said, "I've bought Cézanne's mountain." He was probably unstable, like any genius. Genius and madness live on the same street. And there's no doubt that the guy had severe sadism, depression. He had a terrible relationship with most of the women in his life, certainly with his children as well. And his legacy, while it is not perfect, is typical of people who break the mold. It's going to be messy and complex, and not everybody's going to like it. But undoubtedly, one of the people who's made the biggest impression, not only on art, but on humanity.
Agreed. I found him incredibly interesting. It was a pleasure looking into Pablo Picasso.
Yeah, now I just want to see more and more of his work.
Yes.
And there's lots to see. So get on the internet if you can't actually get to these art galleries and museums, and have a look at the paintings that have fetched these unbelievable prices, and that belong both to private individuals and to galleries all over the world, and are held as people's most treasured possessions. You know, who's the Picasso going to is what rich kids fight over.
100%, because it's worth more than the house.
It's worth more than anything, business. Phenomenal. So there he is, Pablo Picasso, undoubtedly one of the most interesting people I've encountered in all these episodes of Blind History. Blind History is brought to you by Taylor Blinds and Shutters. All the episodes are available on the cliffcentral.com website and app, as well as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. He also vacillated in the very beginning from being sort of a moderate to becoming an extreme leftist and a big communist supporter. I mean, he drew portraits of Stalin. He got the Lenin Prize eventually. He was hugely controversial. He was investigated by the CIA and the FBI for being a communist sympathizer in Europe, and joined the French Communist Party in the last few years of his life. So politically, not shy either.